Hey YouTube, this is Custoda again, and today I wanted to talk about just a little bit about the MonoTouch and some other ways that you can learn how to program MonoTouch. I also wanted to cover glassy buttons. It's some code out there that's freely available from GitHub that basically makes these really awesome looking buttons, and you don't have to really do a lot. So, and I will put links to all this code in the comments so that you don't have to go find this yourself because that's always the secret of it. A lot of times people ask me, how did you learn how to program in MonoTouch so quickly? And they're quite honestly, I read other people's code. That's how I learn, is by reading others. And if I can look at examples, and then I can use those to figure out how to do my own stuff. Up here from the Zermier website, these are the guys that make MonoTouch. They have under the samples just a massive amount of examples. And I highly recommend, if you want to learn how to program, read theirs, because this is, of course, Safari's rendering this not 100% right, but read their examples, because that's how I learned. If you want to learn from example, and that's what you're doing when you're watching my videos, is learn from examples. So go out and download these and try them out. Compile them, run them, look at the source code, read and understand them. That's the way to learn. So with that, the guy that wrote, one of the original developers, Zeria, is this dude right here. And I can't pronounce his name. I'm not even going to try. But he wrote a couple of utility classes that allow you to make these awesome looking buttons. And one of the complaints that a lot of developers say, well, geez, the Apple stock buttons look like crap. Well, no, well, yeah, okay, they do. But in the standpoint, Apple always tells you, hey, it's up to you to color them and do what you want with them. If anything, it's kind of nice that Apple gives us the flexibility to make them look however we want. And the fact that the Mono guys are agreeing with that, but then also providing some free code out there as examples on how to do them and make them look even better. Yay for that. So what I thought about doing today is, well, I'll show you how to get this code and how to get it compiled and working with a couple of these buttons. Sound great? All right. So let's fire up Mono real quick. You can see here I have a previous project open, so I'm just going to kind of close that and start a new project. So under Mono here, I'm just going to close it out completely and start out from scratch. Mono develop. And we're going to make a new solution. So I'm going to file new solution. And once again, we're just going to start with a very basic MonoTouch application, one of those basic view applications, a single view. And we'll call this glass button demo. And we're going to use the glass button libraries that are available on the internet from GitHub to kind of go through and look at these buttons and see if they look better, and maybe you can play with them a little bit and decide what you want to do with them. So you can see here, I've got some free code that came part of our template by selecting that. And we have the controller, and we got a zip file. All right. So to start out with, I'm going to open up our zip file and put some controls out there for us to play with. And we should get our view up here. As always, I closed the Solution Explorer because I really don't need to see the code over on the left. And we're going to take a look at dragging out a couple of controls. So let's drag out a text box. And then let's also drag out a label that we can use to take whatever's in the text box and put in the label. This is kind of like that Hello World bonus app. And I want to just bring out a regular button to show the difference between a regular button and one of these glossy buttons. So I'm going to hard code coordinates, and I'm going to hard code coordinates for a reason, because that way I know where to draw my glossy button, because since this is custom code, I'm going to have some coordinates down. So I'm going to make my text box. I'm using the ruler option right here to actually select my text box and set how big I want it to be. I'm going to make it 200 by, and then you can see here the height is, you can't change it, but it's at 30 right now. I'm going to take my label, put it just a little bit below that. I'm going to take this button here, and I'm going to make it say the word done. And I'm going to change its size so that we can compare the two buttons together. So I'm going to say that this button's X and Y coordinates are okay per se, but let's change the width. Let's make it 240 or 68 by 30. So you can see it's a very small button now. And we'll make another button up here that does the same thing, that so we can see the difference between the two of them. Fun thing we're doing with our label here, I made it a little bit bigger, made it the size for our text box. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow it to word wrap. So if somebody types in a bunch of more text, they can. And then when you do that, you can kind of just make this bigger. And if you do this right, you have to set the lines equal to more than one right here so you can see that. I'm going to make this a little bit more. I'm going to make it 2 lines so that when we type in there, it will automatically, let's make the font, this should work. I have word wrap, line break set to word wrap, behavior set there, lines there. This is a test message to see if word wrap works. See there? So if we kind of scroll this down, there we go, we got word wrap. We'll move our button down a little bit so we can just kind of keep that the same thing. And that way, if somebody types a bunch of stuff in our text box, we got it. So what I did was I set the lines to 2. I went and set the line breaks to word wrap, and that allows you to make labels with longer words. So that's a little tip for you. And you could set the font to something different too. And I'm going to say nothing and A right now. There's nothing typed in. So let's go and close out of this because we are pretty much done with this. We'll let the rest of the work be. Oh, we should. No, we're not done because we need to make a pointer to our label, right? So we can set the text. Duh. So let's close that out, bring up our editor, get our UI code over here so we can talk to both of it. Let's add in the, we want to make a pointer to our label message. And then we also need to make a pointer to the text box so we can get the text out of it, right? So we need to make that too. So let's call this text field message. So we have the label message, text field message. Sounds good enough to me. Go back here, we're going to save, and then we're going to exit out of Xcode. Final thing we want to do is we want to take a look at our designer file and make sure that our code was updated from Xcode. So you can see here we have both our pointer to our label message and our pointer to our text box. So far, so good. Now we need to make 2 CS files, and we're going to cut and paste those from the internet on these web pages. There is a built-in class, there's a class example for the glass button and a graphics utility that he uses to make the rectangles round. So I'm going to use OpenApple, or the command key, OpenApple A, to select all that, and I'm going to copy it with OpenApple C. Or you can just right click and copy, however you feel comfortable copying text. Once again, these URLs are going to be provided in the YouTube notes, so you don't have to worry about that. I'm going to go back to Mono here. I'm going to make file new and file, and we're just going to make it empty CS, and we'll call this, I think he called that class glass button. And it's called glass button. I like to make my file names exactly the same with the class button. And we can see here, I'm just going to open Apple A to highlight all this and open Apple V to paste it all in. So we can see here, we've got this. Now, of course, the graphics utility is going to come up red right now. And the simple reason is we haven't cut and pasted that into our solution yet. Let's go ahead and save that and close it. And then we'll make the other. So we'll make a new file, and that was called graphics util. Go over this file here. Since I'm lazy, I'll just grab the name so I don't have to worry about typing it wrong. Copy that. Make it this, empty class. Click new. We're going to do a open Apple A, function D to delete that. And then I'm going to go into Safari, open Apple A to select all of it, open Apple C to copy, and back to Mono Develop and open Apple V to paste it. And we'll save that also. And now we have 2. Notice the namespace is a little bit different than our namespace, so we'll have to keep track of that. We're in MonoTouch dialog. So we'll have to keep track of that when we make our button to do that. So normally you do this code in view to load. That's when we typically set up any new controls and stuff like that. So that's where we're going to set up this code. So to make one of these, we just need to make a variable and kind of set up not only the button, the new button we created, but then also create the delegate for it. So what happens when it clicks. We can do all that within this view to load, although we could make a method called setup controls. That would probably be better. Set controls. Make a method for that so that we can customize that method without dirtying up this. I'm going to refactor and create that method, which is an option in modern IDEs to automatically generate code for you. And let's go ahead and start by saying var, and we'll just say button done, and we'll say equals new glass. So we need to do our namespace here, MonoTouch dialog glass button, as you can see. Now it takes in a rectangle F, and if you remember my last video on action sheets, the date picker, we had to deal with these before. So it's basically 4 floating point numbers, X, Y, width, and height. Not too crazy to know. We're going to set some coordinates here, and I have these coordinates kind of written down so that they match with our text box. So 240 by 40, so we're going to say we're going to make that from the X coordinate. We're going to go over 240 pixels, and we're going to go 40 pixels down, and then we're going to make it 68 pixels by 30 pixels. And that was the same size as the other button that we did, so that we can compare these two buttons together. Now within that, we're going to use the parenthesis option here to set some of the options of our button. We're going to say that the normal color equals UI color, and you can pick from any UI color. I'm going to use blue actually, and use the comma to string along properties. We could say the highlighted color, see that here, equals UI color dot red. And we could say like the disabled color, let's make that black. So disabled color equals UI color black. And we're not going to use a comma because we're done with our arguments that we're sending this. Now we could do a delegate method, which is not that hard. We can just do a button here, button done, dot. Now in his code, he doesn't call it touched up inside. He renamed that method, so he's firing that method based on the tapped call. So it's not touch up inside, but it's the same syntax. So we can make a delegate, and it's the same thing as touched up inside. So inside of here, we can just take the text. So we have text field message dot text, and we can say our labels equal to that. So we want to say our label message text equals, and we're just basically copying it from our text box just to prove that our button worked. And the final thing we need to do is we need to add this button onto our view. You know, our view is basically like our panel per se that we're adding our controls into. And so every view has got a add subview, and you can add your controls in through that method. So we're going to say this.view, because we are in a view controller, and a view controller must have a view inside of it. We can say this.view.add add subview. We're just going to add our button to that button. Done. Now we could also set some text to it. Let's see if I can remember how to do that. Button done.text, or I think it's title equals. And if we take a look here, it should just title. You can see here that it's just a string. So, or actually I think we have to use a set title. Yeah, we have to use the set title method. So we're going to say set title equals, and we'll say done. And then it's asking us for the control state. And we're just going to use control state normal. And if you've watched some of my other videos, I've explained that, you know, there are other control states for like when it's highlighted and stuff, you can change the word. I'm just going to leave it for the normal state. And by default, if you use normal and you don't set anything else, it'll always just use that. Now we also can set the color of that. So button done.title. If you take a look here, there's a method called title color, I do believe. Yep, so here it is. So you can kind of see that that is the title color. You can get it back, and you also could set it using set title color. And we could make that equal to UI color dot white, because we are making our button blue. We want to make the title show up, and we'll say UI control state normal again. So we're setting the color. Now we probably should put some comments here, you know. That's always the best way to write your code. Set title and color of title. We want to basically handle the touch up inside event. And then here we're making our button, create button and default colors. Now we got some great comments in our code, and I highly recommend getting used to put comments in. Do not make your fellow programmers upset by not commenting your code and then leaving a company and then making somebody else try to read your crappy code without comments. Add to the default. And some of this stuff is kind of obvious what it's doing. So, but if you're a newbie, just learning how to program, like a 1 or 2 year into programming, comments make the world. Your variable names, they're huge. Make your variable name something that makes common sense. And then also, obviously comment your code as much as possible. So we can see here, oh, I forgot a semicolon in my method call, my free method that I got built. So got to put that in, otherwise the debug won't work. You can see it's saying, hey, unexpected symbol. Well, it's unexpected because if you look at the previous line, it was missing a semicolon. If we go ahead and compile our nice little application here that we got, we'll see that, wow, look at that. We got a nice done button. You can see that it's a little small for the word done. So we could play around with the font a little bit, code, and we have the big done button. If I click it, you can see it changed the color red. Now, of course, my text did not change on my label. Oh, I did not type any in. Let's message, test message, done. And there's our test message. So you can see the highlighted color. When I clicked on it, it changed color. You can see it's kind of got a big also border. You could go in the back end of the code that is provided and change that. Now that the source code is provided, it's up to you to decide what you want to do with that source code. And that's the beauty of the open source world and getting some of this stuff for free. If we kind of go in here and take a look here at the glass button code, you can see here's all the code it takes to make that. Now he's using something, the CG Core Graphics. That's Apple's graphics framework. And in Microsoft's world, you have something called DirectX, and Core Graphics is the closest comparison I can make to DirectX. Now, of course, DirectX has Direct Draw, which is the 2D version, and DirectX itself is actually the 3D version, or Direct 3D. In Apple's world, the 2D is done with Core Graphics framework, and the 3D world's done with an open source project called OpenGL. So depending on what you're doing with those, you may need to use different ones. But the code is not that hard to read, and you can kind of make sense of it. We got a color space, and RBG is red, green, blue. Those are the type of colors. And if we go through here, he's got some bounds he's making for those, and he's using point F. A point just a point in space, if you remember from geometry. So none of this is that hard to read. And then a gradient. Now, I'd probably have to go read up the code on CG gradient to understand how that works, but it's not very complex. You're basically just blending colors. And we can see here that we're making a gradient for the button. And we have a container that we're using to make the round rect path, and that's this graphics library. And what that does is it takes the rectangle and kind of chews out the 4 corners. And then we have some... basically making the background, and right here he fills the background of it, and we can see that he's got another gradient that he's probably using. I'm going to guess that this is probably the code that he's using for the right here. I'm guessing is the border around it, just because I see line width 2. So to play around with this, let's just set it to 1 real quick and see what happens. And that's the beauty of having the source code available to you, that you can just kind of go through and play with it and say, hey, I like that or didn't like that. So it didn't look like it did all that much for us. It still looks kind of thick. But you'll have to go through and play with the source code a little bit and see if you want to possibly use this and possibly change it a little bit. You can also play around with because this is class from UI button. So all the stuff that happens with UI button, we can kind of go through and change. So if you understand enough about the UI button control, since it's its parent, we can do things like change the font. So, button done dot title, and there should be in here a title font. I don't remember where it is. I might have to do another. I think it must be title label. Yeah, so if we take a look, that's a UI label dot, and then we should say font here. Yeah, so we can see that the font is right here, and from the font we can actually go to the size set. So size, let's just see, point size. So you can see here that we have both the size and the width. size. So we can get it and we can say make it with size this. So we can kind of go through and play around with the label just like we would with the label, and kind of change around that font. So remember that this is just a subclass of the UI button. So because of that, if you Google how to play around with a button, you can use those same properties to change the things like the font of the button, etc. You know, change the, maybe you want a different system button font, or maybe you want the text to be smaller, which is probably what I would do, is make that text a little bit smaller. So there you got it, folks. Using the glass button CS files that are provided from the developers that wrote Mono, and on GitHub. You can get these. I'll have the links to those in my notes. And also, I highly recommend taking a look at their examples. They have a lot of examples out there. They've spent a lot of time doing that. It really, you should take advantage of those. You know, it's more than just watching YouTube videos. The best way to learn is to read somebody else's examples and take a look and play around and debug and put breakpoints in and change it. That's how you learn how to code. Books will only get you so far, and typing in, at some point in time, you need to read other people's code. So folks, I appreciate watching, and like I said, in the future, in the next couple weeks, you'll start to see some MonoTouch, or excuse me, Mac Mono videos come up, and those are actually how to program Mac applications, not iPhone applications, so full-blown Apple applications. And I'll go through and explain how to do that with C#, and we'll play around with Windows and a couple different ways of doing those things. And the good news is that in the Mac world, there's a lot more controls than there is in MonoTouch because of the fact that it's a mobile development environment. So thanks, and have a great day.